Hey, what's up, guys? My name is Connor, and welcome back to Otoconia. I'm very excited. We're doing a solo episode podcast on the Vinyl Podcast blog. I hope you guys have been enjoying our recent episodes. We had one with special guest Connor for Mac Miller Swimming. We also had special guest Michelle with ACDC Live. We will be having the main season back of Otoconia blog vinyl once Christmas break starts, so we'll do more episodes with Hurrah. But until then, we're going to do a solo episode and we're just going to have some fun. So please keep in mind that the YouTube version of this video will not have the music. If you are interested in listening to the show with the music will be edited in on Spotify. So please check out our Spotify channel. It is in the comments. In addition, if you want a bi-weekly newsletter associated with the channel, keeping you updated with news and behind the scenes, please email otoconiaradio@gmail.com. In addition, if you want to email us to be on the podcast or to send us vinyl, please do so. So the album we are doing today is the 13th Step by A Perfect Circle. I have this album on vinyl. It is one of my favorites from A Perfect Circle. Mine is a close debate between the first album, Murder Noms, and the 13th Step. But I think overall the fan base sort of agrees that this is one of their best albums. So let's get into some information. So the 13th Step was released in 2003. It was the second studio album from A Perfect Circle. It went platinum and was very commercially successful. So the writing process was very different than Murder Noms, their first album. The album Murder Noms was primarily written before the band even formed. The guitarist Billy Howardell, he wrote the album and was looking for kind of a band to perform it. And so he met Maynard James Keenan, the lead singer of Tool and Pucifer in A Perfect Circle. He was actually part of Tool's, prep team. He was the guitar prep for Adam Jones, and that's how Billy Howardell and Maynard James Keenan met. And so this album was very different. It was a collaboration between Maynard James Keenan and Billy. And in particular, Maynard James Keenan wanted to move away from the general hard rock sounds of Murder Noms, and he thought that the approach would be redundant. So instead, he pushed for a softer sound with more atmospheric and ambience. And conversely, Howardell preferred the heavier composition. So there was a bit of tug and pull from each of them influencing the album, with other band members often being the mediator. And I think this really made the album unique. I think it really has both aspects. It's a hard rocking album, yet there's something very different about this album. The vibe and the atmosphere and the ambience is just really on point, and it's kind of ethereal. I think that is the best way to describe this album. And so this album was written during Maynard James Keenan's Lateralis tour with Tool. And so it was kind of written in between touring, and when the touring ended, the band got together and really got the final product together. So I find it interesting. The writing process really does kind of mix the first album with this new approach, and I really do enjoy it. I think there's almost a haunting, ethereal sound to this album, which is perfect because let's discuss some of the major themes. So I'm going to quote Maynard James Keenan. He had us a quote saying that, "I don't think the album is specifically for people who are going through recovery, although that metaphor is absolutely present. Many of the songs are sung from the perspectives of recovery, from the perspective of a person who's in denial about a loved one, and from a drug perspective itself, the perspective of a person who is starting to realize there is an issue and of a person who is ready to deal with it." And so this album is really a concept album, and it takes different perspectives on addiction. You know, it's a very human problem and a very complicated and almost in a sense a philosophical problem. And so the album's title is kind of a reference to the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and the 13th step, which is the title of the album, is referring to living after going through addiction and recovery. And so this is a really powerful album in my opinion. And the 13th step also refers to kind of this creepy phenomena when a more experienced member of a 12-step group pursues a romantic relationship with a new group member. So there's kind of that double meaning, and it kind of also adds to that haunting, ethereal ambience of the album, and majorly the theme of what happens to a person when they survive addiction. And so another quote from Maynard James Keenan on the Emotion DVD commentary: "The songs on 13th Step, for the most part, are about the various processes of addiction, behavioral addictions, chemical addictions, and each song is kind of sung from a different perspective. I have a lot of friends who've gone through a lot of these situations. Some of the songs are sung from the perspective of the actual drug, from the perspective of someone who has realized they have an issue or problem, and also from the perspective of a person who realizes that if they don't do something, they're going to die. A song from a perspective of a person who is in denial about a loved one dying right before their eyes. In the case of the song The Outsider, it is sung from a perspective of a person who doesn't understand at all what their friend is going through, what their loved one is going through. And they think that it's more like a sprained ankle, that they can kind of walk it off. And so I think at heart, this album, like Maynard James Keenan just said, is really about his perspective on seeing some of his friends going through this process. This album in particular was inspired by the famous Lane Staley from Alice in Chains, who sadly died from a heroin addiction in the 90s. And the Tool bassist the original Tool bassist from the Undertone opiate era also struggled through addiction. And so what's so interesting to me about this album is when you listen to a lot of songs from the 90s, a lot of the grunge era albums, Nirvana, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, there is this heavy theme of addiction and drug abuse. And in these albums, you can see the anger, especially in Alice in Chains albums. If you listen to the self-titled Alice in Chains albums, it's really quite haunting and quite an angry and sad album. But this album almost takes a different approach. There definitely is that heavier aspect that we were talking about before on this album, but it really does have that atmospheric and ambience element to it, making it kind of like I referred to before, an ethereal, haunting kind of vibe. And I think that's kind of the perfect way to describe addiction. I mean, this album is genius in the aspect that it's taking different perspectives, and I think no matter what perspective or what song you're looking at, that vibe and feeling is the same. There's this haunting sense of losing oneself to an addiction, and really that's what this album is about and what it explores. And that's a very human, I think, experience, to kind of lose oneself in something that one can't fight or control. And so we're going to explore that theme as we go through some of the songs. If you're listening to the Spotify edition, we'll also be playing the songs. But if you're on YouTube, bear with me. There won't be any songs, but the intros will still be there. All right, so let's go over the cover art. The cover art was always kind of baffling to me until I really sat down and kind of thought about it a bit more. And so I will be, showing you guys the vinyl I have. I do have this one on vinyl in the video, so if you're on YouTube watching, you can see the vinyl. And so it's this lady who's really pale with bleached hair who is looking off screen. And there's this giant banana slug on her face. And so the clear analogy for this is the parasitic nature of addiction. This slug starts off as something small, but it's getting larger and larger, and it's more visible. I mean, it's in the center of the album, and the woman's face is almost secondary. And the slug itself, I think, symbolizes the addiction, and it is on the worn face of its host. You can see that the woman is pale. She's losing all color, and I think the slug is very vibrant. It's yellow next to the Perfect Circle logo, and it kind of represents the alluring nature of this initial addiction, how it almost seems to bring peace or some sense of heaven, and yet it is slowly draining the addict. But the slug, the face, and the lighting combined are visceral and are comfortable, and I think it really does achieve that effect. If you want to learn more about the album art, I recommend watching the music video for Weak and Powerless. We'll talk about it a little bit more when we get into the song itself, but it is the same woman from the album artwork and the music video. And on the back of the album is the woman with 13, like a 13 number tattoo on her arm, and this kind of corresponds how each song references an aspect of the 12-step program. So let's get into it. If you're listening to Spotify, we're going to jump into the song The Package. Really good song, a really great start for an album. The bass is insane, the drums are insane. Let's get right into it. If you're watching on YouTube, we're going to get right into the commentary. Alrighty, so The Package. The Package is a really good intro song in my opinion. The song itself is pretty straightforward in interpretation. It's about a main character getting his fix from an acquaintance. He's pretending to be friends with the person to score the drugs. The song reflects this motif. It starts very calm. It kind of has this sing-songy, ethereal, slow-paced drone to it. The bass and the drums are droning on, and the lyrics and the vocals are quite haunting. And then there's this drastic shift in the middle of the song where the guitar is coming heavy, the drums are going crazy, and the vocals kind of have this angry aspect to it. And I think it really symbolically goes with the story that's being told. The addict can, play the game for a little bit when he doesn't have the drug. He can smile, he can put on a fake facade, he can nod his head, but when the itch and the urge to use the drug becomes unbearable, he becomes frantic and almost animalistic. And the song is really about the drug driving this person to use people by any means necessary to obtain what they want. And that's kind of a haunting theme or message that we often overlook. And I think overall it's an interesting commentary on what it means, to be human. This addiction is causing the person to sacrifice their self and their honesty, and it really shows how darkness can kind of seep into the person. So let's look at some of the lyrics in particular. I think this album and this song in particular has some great lyrics. Smile and drop the cliche till you think I'm listening. Take just what I came for, and then I'm out the door again. And it just really shows a visceral depiction of how this person is just using another person to get what they want. And it doesn't even have to be addiction. You can really apply this to any scenario in which someone is, using other people to get what they want. And there's some great symbolism of addiction in the song too. I don't need another friend. Comfort is a mystery, crawling out of my own skin. Just give me what I came for, and then I'm out the door again. Just really good lyrics and really powerful in my opinion. Lie to gain what I came for, lie to gain what I need now, lie to gain what I crave, and lie just smile and get what's mine. So like I said, just a very visceral depiction of the calls of addiction and needing this now. And obviously I think the package kind of can represent the drugs itself, or like I said, it can represent anything that is driving someone to kind of sacrifice their humanity and become more of this like animalistic persona. Up next on the before we go into the next song, I just wanted to mention too, I picked this album in particular. I am more of a Tool fan than a Perfect Circle fan, but after doing the bonus episode with Connor on Mac Miller Swimming, I thought this would be a good album thematically because it touches on a lot of what we talked about in that previous episode. And I think it's interesting how this is a concept that transverses genres. And it's still an issue that we're dealing with today. It's not just 90s and rockers. I mean, if you look around, the opioid crisis has really taken a toll, and it's still going on today. So I think these albums are artistic in the sense that they're observing what's going on in reality, and they're trying to make art and music to remind us and to historically place these concepts, even though they, go across time. Alrighty, so up next we have Weak and Powerless. If you're listening on Spotify, let's get right into it. So the song, welcome back. The song Weak and Powerless by Perfect Circle. It talks about the narrator attempting to overcome a drug addiction. And it's a fun fact, the band's highest charting song is of 2019, reaching number 1. It's also featured on the movie Underworld, the sci-fi werewolf vampire movie, and Maynard James Keenan's other band, Pucifer, is also featured in those films. So this is a reference to the first step of the 12-step program. Admitting one is powerless and weak to the calls of addiction. And this one has a very good music video. Before we dive into the music video, let's kind of go over some of the lyrics. And so, to me, what's great about this song, like all of these songs, is just really the imaging. Tilling my own grave to keep me level, jam another dragon down the hole, digging to the rhythm and the echo of a solitary siren, one that pushes me along and leaves me so. So, tilling one's own grave, directly referencing the dangers of the addiction and how he's digging himself into a hole. Jam another dragon down the hole, trying to chase that original high that has left this person trapped and powerless in this addiction. And the solitary siren, a mythical creature one hears at sea that draws them to their doom. Just some really great imagery and some great lyrical genius. And the chorus, desperate and ravenous, so weak and powerless over you, it kind of shows, this song and the first song really go hand in hand. You can see that the person, the addict, will do anything to get what they want. They'll use people, they'll lie, they'll smile, they'll nod their head. But you almost, kind of see them as a gross character. You see that as bad. This person shouldn't be acting that way. But then when you hear this song, it kind of contextualizes the struggle that they're having that is so foreign to people who haven't experienced addiction. And, the lyrics, that's just great. Little angel, go away, come again some other day. The devil has my ear today, I'll never hear a word you say. He promised I would find little solace and some peace of mind, whatever, just as long as I don't feel so. Just amazing lyrics. And the song itself is just great. The way it's sung, Maynard James Keenan does use this technique a lot where he'll start off singing in the same, verse, very soft and then louder and then soft and louder. It does kind of give this almost like a siren sound and ambience. There's something kind of calling you forward in the song. And the guitar playing is quite revolutionary. I think overall there was a lot of lineup changes for this album, but this album is just expertly produced. Every instrument has its own highlights, and in particular this song. I mean, there's a reason this song was number one as of 2019. Also, the music video is very powerful, very symbolic. So you see this woman with long bleached hair, pale, who is naked in the woods. And just off the bat, I mean, to think about the symbolism there, there's really no barrier to this addiction. The person is naked in the woods, their addiction, their problem, their fight is, right in the open, and they're vulnerable. And as the music video progresses, you see that there's this hole in her stomach that keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And she tries to fill this hole by, scrounging around the forest looking for these lizards and other snakes and reptiles and throwing them into this giant hole in the forest. But the more she tries to fill the hole, the larger the one in her stomach becomes. And you can kind of see how it's depicting the cycle of addiction, trying to fill this cycle of addiction with anything else to try to escape this cycle. And so a very, very powerful music video. The song is great. I would highly recommend you go listen to it before listening to the rest of the podcast. Weak and Powerless by A Perfect Circle. Alrighty, we're going to move on quick to the next song called The Noose. If you're listening on Spotify, you will hear it right now. Alrighty, so The Noose. The lyrics were inspired by a meeting attended by Keenan, in which a speaker discussed the tendency of others in recovery to be unfairly self-righteous. And this is an interesting concept and an interesting song. So another quote by Maynard James Keenan: "It's really a powerful thing for a person to come back from the edge of death and work their way back to being a human again. These people are very impressive survivors, but some of them tend to wear that as some kind of crown and forget about the atrocities they committed." And so the perspective of this song really focuses on steps 2 and 5 of the 12-step program. In the lyrics, the person speaking the perspective has found God and is confessing his wrongdoings, but this has now led them to believe they are forgiven and now self-righteous. And this also references step 9 of the 12-step program, making amends. But the song asks this interesting question: what about the lives that have been taken or irreversibly impacted? So this addict feels so self-righteous now that he's come back from the brink of addiction, but what about all of the actions in his past? Did he have other friends that he dragged into addiction and drug use with him? Could he have been a drunk driver who killed someone in an accident? It really kind of goes to show how quickly we want to shed our old self and our old skin and, be something separated from what we were, in that recovery. And so this song really is about that separation, that cognitive dissonance. And the halo, which is used in the song, is the noose. A halo being a symbol of innocence and purity, but now being transformed into something that is going to kill the individual. So a really good symbolism there with using the halo and the noose. Let's go over some of the lyrics. Some of the lyrics in the song are great. Let's see. So, verse 1, you can see that the friend or whatnot, a family member, is happy that they've overcome their addiction and that they've supposedly cast their demons out. But there is this, almost doubt that onlooker has. They've seen how addiction can take over someone's life, how they can ruin someone, and to just claim, oh, I'm fixed now, I've cast all that out and I'm living a new life. Of course, a friend or family member would be worried and almost skeptical that it's that easy just to let go of that past persona. And so let's go over the chorus. It's not to pull your halo down around your neck and tug you off your cloud, but I'm more than just a little curious how you go, planning on going to make your amends to the dead. Really, like we talked about before, just amazing lyrics, using the halo as a noose, tugging the person off their cloud of self-righteousness and addressing the wrongdoings that they've done that can't be reversed. And so this song really does have a haunting quality to it. It kind of picks up in speed as it goes on, and as the hook is repeated, it does have this kind of like climactic ending. So very haunting and ethereal song. Really does reflect some of the themes that we've been talking about and some of the complexities of addiction even after recovery. Alrighty, so next up, we're running through these. This is going to be a quick episode. We're going to do the first disc and then do the second disc in a separate episode. So let's move on. We're going to play the song Blue now. So the song Blue is about the denial of addiction. In this case, from the point of view of someone in an addict's life who cares about them. This song was drawn from personal experience. Maynard James Keenan wrote or spoke in the documentary. I dated a person for a very short period of time. Eventually I figured it out, but I was that guy who just didn't know. I was trying to introduce this new girlfriend to friends, and they're going, Maynard, she's a junkie. And I had no idea. I was a dumbass. I just thought she was tired. And so, he's taking from that personal experience, and he's addressing the emotion of denial. Maynard was dating this girl who was addicted to some form of drug, and Maynard was completely oblivious. And so we kind of touch on two themes. One, denial. Was Maynard really ignorant to the fact she was doing drugs, or did he just not want to see it? That feeling and that question is addressed in the song. Then the second major theme is how this woman was almost living a double life. Maynard didn't even know she was dealing with this addiction and this mental struggle, and it can kind of depict how addiction really does become a part of us when we fall victim to it, and how our old self versus what we're becoming is just so completely separated from our awareness. So let's go over some of the lyrics. This song is great. I'm a big fan of A Perfect Circle in particular because I think the lyrics are just really good. I think Maynard James Keenan is really a master lyricist. That's a big reason why I love Tool and Pucifer. So let's get into it. The very first verse, he's talking about how I didn't want to know, best to keep things in the shell, and because I never quite learned how to swim. And so, Maynard, he's saying here that I've never dealt with this addiction issue, and I don't know how it feels. I don't know much about it, but I've seen it, and I just don't know how to. When he's saying I never quite learned how to swim, he never learned how to broach the subject or to kind of help a person who is drowning with this addiction. And, in the pre-chorus, he's closing his eyes. He's taken by a seamless vision. So in his head, he's trying to paint this girlfriend as this idealistic person who's not struggling through this addiction and who's not breaking down. He's closing his eyes. He's ignoring the smoke. And then in the chorus, he is, he's calling himself an optimist. She's turning blue in front of him, and he's like, oh, this is such a lovely color for you. And he just wants to stare at her. And so, again, kind of separating this denial from the perspective of a loved one or family member. The person's literally turning blue in front of you, and instead of being alarmed and, seeing the smoke, he's kind of just ignoring it and, taking that image and putting it into his idealistic vision of this girl. Let's see. Yep, and then that takes us to the outro chorus. So, very good song, very touching. Again, this one does have kind of this haunting quality to it. And I think it's hard to really identify where that haunting, ethereal ambience is coming from. I think the guitar has really good voice. At times it can be very subtle, and then at times it can be very heavy. The bass and the drums, the rhythm section, really drive the song and kind of have these subtle rhythms that really string everything together with the lyrics and with the singing and with the guitar. And you have Maynard, who is an amazing vocalist and really achieves that effect. Alrighty, we have 2 more songs left on this episode. This will be a shorter episode. The next song is Vanishing. To me, this is kind of an homage to a funny incident that happened in the studio. So Vanishing was supposed to be on the first album, Murday Noms, but Billy Howardell accidentally named the song Test, and he couldn't find it for the album, so he thought it was lost. They later found the album, called it Vanishing because it's, a reference to losing that song. They did some modification and put it on this album. I think it's a good transition song. It really resets the mood from the first four songs. The first four songs are powerful and they have these, themes that we've been discussing. So it kind of gives the listener a break to kind of resettle and to get ready for the next, part of the album. Vanishing also could, I guess, tie into some of the themes of addiction. A loved one vanishing to addiction, or like quite literally, leaving their lives to become an addict. Alrighty, so we're gonna jump to the next song, The Stranger. So the next song is A Stranger, I'm sorry. So this song in particular, it's told from the perspective of someone who has recovered from addiction and is in contact with a new member of AA trying to become a sponsor. And there's this sense of a frustration because the person has lived through addiction, survived, but they're frustrated with the people that they cannot help, with the addicts that keep relapsing, that aren't doing the right things, and even trying to bring the sponsor back into addiction. And I think this song is important because this is a frustrating issue, when you're dealing with addiction and loved ones with addiction. This isn't an issue that gets solved and is done for. It's a constant struggle and a constant battle. And I think those not struggling with addiction, who haven't had the experience, there is a sense of frustration of, oh, why can't you just snap out of it? Why can't this be like Maynard said, a sprained ankle where it eventually heals? Because it doesn't heal. Those experiences, that trap of the initial dragon, really keeps these people in this cycle of abuse. And so this is a really powerful song in that aspect. And, Maynard was exactly in this situation, with Lane Staley. They toured a lot in the 90s. They were friends. He was the lead singer of Alice in Chains. Maynard had Tool. They were coming up together as young men, trying to make it in the rock and roll industry. And, Maynard watched Lane Staley decline, and everyone was powerless, to save him. And so this frustration really is channeled into this song. And the very first part of the song, he's talking about cast the calming apple up and over satellites to draw out the timid wild one to convince you it's all right. It kind of gives this depiction of trying to lure a wild animal that's injured out of the woods and feed it. There's this addict who is timid and jumpy and, wants to return back to addiction. And this person's trying to make a connection with them and tell them, it's all right. And then the next verse is identifying the aspect of the helper. He's saying, I listen for the whisper of your sweet insanity while I formulate denials of your effect on me. And so while the survivor of the addiction is trying to help the addict, he is reminded of his old self, the whispers of that sweet insanity of being addicted to this drug. And he's also trying to deny that this is having an effect on him from a mental or an emotional standpoint. It must be troubling to have survived addiction and then be surrounded with people who are still in the battles of addiction. So a very interesting self-reflection there. And then as the song goes on, the helper is trying to distance himself from the addict because it's going to tear his world down and bring him back into that battle. In the final verse, he says, "Won't you move away, you fucking tornado? I'm better off without you, tearing my world down." And it's just such a visceral and angry response. This survivor is trying to help other people, but in his frustration, he's realizing that he can't fulfill this role as someone who wants to help because it's bringing himself down. So a very interesting reflection. Alrighty, guys. I know this was a quick episode, but we're going to pause there. We will do the second episode in another part. Thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe if you want to keep up with more content. We are also working on a new video game series. We're going to post videos of Skyrim playthroughs. I kind of like it in the sense that it's a no commentary. it's kind of fun to watch that game being played in 4K. And I'm trying to make it as scenic as possible. And so we're not going to stream it. We're going to post videos because we're going to try to get better visual quality. But if you're interested, keep watching that series. As always, we have the art blogs that you could tune into if you're interested in some of the artwork or photography that has been used on this channel. I think in an upcoming episode, I will talk about some of the photography I've taken for the intro, photos that I used before the videos. So, like I said, please like, subscribe, follow us on Spotify and YouTube. That is where you can see our content. And please email us at otoconiaradio@gmail.com to get into contact with us. Thank you for your support. I'm having a great time experiencing this with figuring out how to record and streaming and video editing and kind of doing this radio blog aspect again. So this has been fun. It's been a fun journey. Thank you for everyone who has watched and supported me in doing this. I couldn't have done it without all of you guys. So thank you. Thanks for watching Otoconia, and I hope you guys enjoyed this episode.